Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. I'm Zoe. It is my week this week to post a video and I will be focusing on plants, but not just any plants. What kind of plants, you ask? Well, Liz and I have decided to choose a theme for the next two videos and we've decided to put a spotlight on Australian native endangered species. Wait, endangered Australian species. Australian species that are endangered. There we go. You're probably wondering, so why are you in one side of the screen? Well, this is going to be my presentation area. So, without further ado, let's delve into the friendly fellow, the friendly flora fellow that I researched this week. And this plant was the one that stood out to me, mainly because of the name. Names are pretty funny to me. You know when librarians say don't judge a book by its cover? Well, I judged this book by its title. And I'm very glad I did. It was a very interesting species. So without further ado, let me introduce to you the Hairy Quandong. Now, I know the name sounds kind of gross, but I can assure you that this plant is in fact not hairy and really not gross. So the Hairy Quandong, I have my script here so I don't go off track. The Hairy Quandong, or the, okay, let's give this a go, Elaeocarpus williamsianus. Yeah, this is a small tree that can grow up to 1.5 meters tall. Describing what the tree looks like in terms of its trunk, its actual body, the bark, it's a creamy brown, I guess. And it has small branches that have reddish brown hairs. Okay, so it is kind of hairy, but not how you'd think it would be. It's like, how do I describe it? It's like school carpet texture. Anyway, in terms of its leaves, the leaves are a glossy green and can grow 9 to 18 centimeters long and 2 to 5 centimeters wide. Now the leaves are distributed along the stem and alternate to each other and grow in clusters. So it's kind of like, it's really random in terms of the cluster growth. It just does that. So in terms of leaf morphology, I couldn't actually find the specifics online for the Hairy Quandong, so I had to kind of look at photos and guess what the leaf morphology was. So I'm guessing that the structure of the leaf, which is supported by the petiole that branches off from the rachis, they have a I can never say this word, lanceolate shape. Lanceolate? Long and wider in the middle, and is shaped like a lance at the tip. Yeah. The leaf is actually quite cool. Quite freaky. This is what I love about Australian plants. They're just weird. The leaves have a subtle toothed edge, which means they have along the edge, if you look at very closely, it's like jagged. One super thing that forms in the leaves, which I kind of find scary, is called a domatia. So a domatia, according to Wikipedia, is a tiny chamber produced by plants that house arthropods. That's so gross, but kind of cool. It's basically like a little cub house. Like if you think of the leaf, it's like a little hole, and like arthropods, like ants and stuff, can just chill inside it. The Hairy Quandong is an angiospermophyta. The Hairy Quandong reproduces seeds that are formed in ovules within flowers that then become fruit. The flowers itself are quite beautiful in my opinion. Here's a picture. The flowers are a pale green and flower from November to December, like. So, judging from that, we can say that the Hairy Quandong likes to flower in warm weather. Don't forget, Australia is very warm and in those months if you're watching this overseas. Like if you're watching this overseas. The Hairy Quandong actually also produces Prussian blue spherical fruit. Picture again. And this ripens from April to December. So this hairy man is distributed to very few sites between Guunangeri and Burringbar in northeast New South Wales, and thrive in a subtropical to warm forest temperatures. However, this tree is critically endangered and is threatened by several causes such as habitat clearing, weed infestation, so the presence of alien species. Bushfires, which we as Australia have had a lot of recently. Human construction such as roadworks. The cattle, human agriculture and cattle also trample plants. Now that is the most annoying one. Hairy Quandong's distribution doesn't quite fit well with constructions that intervene and fragment natural habitats. So the trees at each site consist of single clones. This makes their distribution very sparse. This makes germination also very difficult and erratic. Also, conservation techniques that will usually be used on endangered species, such as retrieving seeds from fruits and propagation, is really hard for the Hairy Quandong, as proven in 2004, where scientists and conservationists figured out that the fruit itself is often very sterile. So conservation in terms of attempting to propagate the species from seeds within the fruit has so far been very unsuccessful. This does not aid the research and the attempts to conserve these endangered species. In 2015, an article claimed that without conservation strategies and human interventions in terms of aiding the survival of these species, the Hairy Quandong will go extinct in the next 10 years. In 2008, a set of research priorities and regional priority actions were established to catalyze the conservation of these plants. These priorities include to design and implement a monitoring program, to conduct more precise assessments on population size, distribution, ecological requirements, and relative impacts of threatening processes, to undertake the survey work in habitats similar to the tastes of the Hairy Quandong to see if there are any additional populations and occurrences of these populations. We would go to the areas of the Hairy Quandong, measure the abiotic factors like temperature, wind, like soil salinity, and then go to the databases and see, where else in Australia are these conditions similar? Then they would go to those places and see if the Hairy Quandong was present there, if populations were present there, or whether or not they could inhabit those areas. Another priority would include conservationists undertaking more seed germination in new ways, so avoiding the seed removal from the fruit, which is quite sterile, as we heard before. Also, the vegetative program trials to determine the requirements for successful establishment of the population. They would also undertake an in situ trial, so an on-site trial, of the Hairy Quandong into the reproductive potential of these species. The government also has recommended the following regional and local priority actions that would support the recovery of the Hairy Quandong. And these are things that you can do, small things to ensure and even aid the conservation of these endangered species. So in terms of habitat loss, disturbance, and modification, you can identify populations in your area of high conservation priority. So if you have some distant memory of seeing a quandong when you've gone on a walk, or you're walking your dog, or you're meeting a friend in some dodgy park, next time you go along the trail or go to that same place, see if the population or the quandong that you saw last time is still there and as abundant as you remember it. And apart from monitoring the loss of the population, also note the population growth if you see it, and tell local conservation centres. It is important to tell conservation centres if you've noticed a growth in Hairy Quandong populations near you, because that means that something about that area is desirable for the population. In regards to weeds, in regards to these invasive species, yes, weeds are damaging to populations of the endemic species, for example, the Hairy Quandong, but make sure that they are removed in an appropriate way that don't impact the species that you are saving. Don't flood an area of weeds with pesticides, as it will kill more than just the invasive species, and it will kill the endemic species that you were trying to save, such as the Hairy Quandong, but also just random other species around. That's like if you got into an argument with your mum and then got mad at your cat. You know, use pesticide in moderation or manually remove the weeds. So, you know, get some gloves on, get your shovel on, dig out, pull out those weeds. It's actually quite therapeutic. So there's certain weeds to look out for that are particularly damaging to the Hairy Quandong are the lantana, so Lantana camara, picture, the camphor laurel, this also known as the Cinnamomum camphora, nice, and a small-leaved privet, the Ligustrum sinensis. Manage the sites of the population of the species to prevent the introduction of invasive weeds. Although I love fungi, the little mushrooms, the little critters of the night, I don't like this fungi that is quite detrimental to the hairy quandong and invasive species. Fungi, parasites, and diseases are a big threat to endemic species and can sprout when environmental hygiene is not maintained. So yes, plants can get sick. Check with your local conservation team whether or not they've developed and implemented a suitable hygiene control protocol to protect certain known sites of populations of the hairy quandong. Having these protocols in place and having them rigid and well known and constantly conducted to maintain the hygiene of these areas will prevent the introduction of potential pathogens during material collection or habitat regeneration activities. Keep your plants safe. Keep the areas of your plants safe. If you undertake appropriate seed collection and storage and give them to your local conservation group, this can actually really help the repopulation and the research of the hairy quandong. Note, this does not mean strip the plant of seeds and fruit. As we said before, the fruit is very sterile. Trying to remove the seed would be there's a high chance that it won't work. Also, don't go around to the hairy quandong and just be like, oh, fruit, I need to collect that seed. If you do that, repopulation might not work very well, natural repopulation. So if a fruit has fallen on the ground, and you can see it very evidently that it's fallen on the ground, pick it up, keep it in your pocket, take it to your local conservation group or your local government center. I think that's the best place to take it to, and give it to them. If you find an area that also suits the habitat requirements of the hairy quandong, let your local authorities know, as you may have just found the next place for additional populations to live. You might have just found the new hotspot for the hairy quandong, the new chill out place. I hope you have found the hairy quandong an interesting species. I think they are beautiful species of plants, and it would be heartbreaking, not just to us, but to the ecosystem around them, if they were to go extinct. So please take this video as a precaution guide. Definitely if you're in Australia, try to raise some awareness, or even try to take some of these actions you use. Even maybe go for a walk for exercise by yourself, social distancing, and see if there are any hairy quandongs around you. And if there are, keep a close watch on them. Keep a close watch and take note of why they're growing in that area, what part of the area make it grow well. Be very observant of whether the population size increases or decreases. Thank you for watching this week. As always, nurture nature. Without nature, we would be dead. See ya!